willing to do that to stop the abusers from hurting them or their children. And then too many times, those cases end in dismissal because the rigid discovery laws that we have in place right now deny them justice. They're here to use their voices to lift up not just themselves, but the thousands of women and some men across the state whose voices have been silent until now. I told them I will be their voice, I'll be their champion, I'll be their advocate, but also their stories themselves are just extraordinary. And I want to ask Angelina just to share what you described to me as some of the barriers that you have when it comes to cases like the one you endured. So, Angelina.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Governor. I think our message that we want to get across, right, is that we're not against the other side, right? It's the facts are we all on the same team. But we want to make sure that the demographics of victims are not left out of the conversation. For too often, survivors have not been invited to the table, right, to have our voices be heard. Survivors are no longer staying silent. We will not cowardly walk away from this, and we appreciate the governor putting her foot down and saying we have to make a stance right now, because for too often, survivors of domestic violence victims are now turning into homicide victims. And all because an order of protection may or may not get dropped due to the fact that a piece of evidence that may not even be relevant to what's happening wasn't present at the time. And we all know that getting a survivor to even admit out of their mouths that they are survivors of domestic violence, I know for myself personally, it took me over 6 months to say I was a victim of domestic violence. It felt like lava coming out of my mouth because I couldn't believe that I was a victim of anything. And this is something that we experience every single day. Survivors of domestic violence have to go to police precincts. We have to make go to the courthouse, get an order of protection. And what does that look like, right? In court, we don't argue feelings. We argue language. So I'm here to put that feeling to you in person, right? Because the feeling of going into a precinct and not being believed is something that runs in our heads because mental and emotional abuse is serious, right? And when you are in a home with someone who has convinced you that no one cares about you, and they are the alpha and the omega, that becomes a problem when we're now seeking for justice. Because survivors, not only do they have to take all of these steps, and there's so many different systems that get involved the minute they decide to take this step. And then could you imagine being told, well, we didn't have your Uber receipt, so your case was dismissed, and now your order of protection is dropped. Could you imagine the feeling? We are here to show we are the faces of things and that nature that can happen to you, right? And we want the other side to understand we're all on the same team. We want to figure out, how do we balance this out? How do we make sure that while we are still protecting the people who are wrongfully convicted, we also protect the people who are trying to get protection from that same system? Thank you.
Thank you. No, it's hard. Well, you heard from one individual, and she represents so many thousands. And listening to their stories a little while ago here in my office, I was also reminded of my mother's story. My mother became a champion for victims of domestic violence because of what she saw and endured in her own home as a child. And instead of living the life of a victim, she led it as a proud survivor, the survivor of what she saw happen to her own mother. And she channeled that into advocacy. And back in the 1970s, when no one talked about spousal abuse, the wife beaters, but people took their sides more often than not, my mother, inexperienced in the whole world of advocacy, just like these women were at one time, came to this Capitol and raised up her voice when I was just a college student, and she told what happened to her mother. And she became a voice for so many and helped open a transitional home for survivors of domestic violence. So their stories really touch a nerve with me, and I'm told I have the empathy of my mother, who said this.
Yes.
When you said that, you said, I see the empathy that you must have gotten from your mother, because I understand them. And I know even how hard it is today to come up here, travel up on a train, disrupt their lives, and have to walk the halls in search of someone who understands what we're fighting for. And I'm really proud to be fighting on their behalf. And people all over this state who are denied the justice because of some technicality in the discovery laws that are written now, and they put their heart and soul into trying to get justice, and it's thrown out because something minor, irrelevant is missing. I'm going to keep fighting till we fix this. I'm going to keep fighting to put this in the budget. This is my path to getting this done. And I will always remember the faces and the voices of these brave women and thank them for what they've done. We are going to continue this fight. We're going to continue fighting not just for public safety, but also affordability, to make sure that we can put more money back in people's pockets at this time when people are just, their heads are spinning. They don't know if these tariffs are going to make, the next time they go to the store, the kids' sneakers made in China are going to be 10 times more than they expected. So families are struggling. And shame on us if we can't put this budget to bed and focus on the needs of the people of this state who put us in these jobs. So thank you so much. Thank you again for being here. And if there's any, Avi, any questions?
So we're going to start with some on-topic questions about DV and the discovery statute. We will take other stuff afterwards, but while we have our guests here who have a train to catch, let's focus on DV. We'll start with Jack and then go to Rob.
When it comes to discovery, why is this such a tough deal for you to close? And what's your response to the legislature essentially spending the week portraying you as an unfair negotiating partner?
I'm not concerned about process. I'm concerned about results. There's a big difference. Outside this Capitol, people aren't watching their clocks and their calendars on the days. They want us to deliver for them. I've always done that. And so I tune that out. All I know is my mind and my body and my soul is focused on getting this done. Because if not now, when? How many more people across this state, if we wait another year, will have to endure what these women did? I say that has to stop right now.
The governor, as well as them, obviously, you mentioned a very specific detail involving an Uber receipt. Governor, could you as well as obviously, talk about how something that small was able to derail, justice in your case?
Well, it's not my case specifically. It's a survivor's case, right? It's understanding that when survivors are going through this process, no one tells you that there's a timeline. No one tells you that there's a clock ticking, right? And what happens with survivors of domestic violence, our property, this iPad, that no longer belongs to me, right? Although I may have bought it and it may be in my possession, when you are dealing with domestic violence, that is a power and control situation. Someone has to have power and control over the other person, right? So now if I've recorded any level of evidence that abuse is now happening to me, and the person that is causing me the harm now takes that and deletes it, right? I have a certain amount of window without me knowing to retrieve that evidence. If that clock now ticks and it's done and I get that evidence in a minute after that clock is out, my case is dropped. My order of protection, that the one thing that I relied on to even come into here, is gone, right? I rely on a state and people to help me be safe. And when victims of domestic violence cases are thrown out because of technicalities, such as maybe a body camera who wasn't even facing the victim, or what happened, did not capture what was actually happening. One body camera out of 8 others. But because that body camera that footage was not put in time, entire case gets dismissed, although you have the other 8 body cameras available for you to see the interaction that just happened with this victim. So now a victim now has to figure out, how do I get protection if my case is dropped? And the message that gets sent when a case is dropped is, your domestic violence didn't happen. It doesn't matter.
Governor, could you go on the same?
No, that's a real example. Those are real life examples. And that's what we're talking about. We're not talking about something that is overwhelmingly prejudicial to the case that would end in a different outcome. We're talking about minor technical materials of evidence, pieces of evidence, that a common sense person out there would say, why would that have any relevance? It has nothing to do with it. Or if it's related to the case but is not relevant to it, there are standards in the law that have been baked in place since 2019 when it was passed that have hamstrung the prosecutors, the district attorneys who are trying to get justice for these women and other victims. And they have to go back and face them and say, I tried, but we didn't have that little piece of evidence in time, even if it's a duplicate of something else we already have, and now your case is dismissed, that's not justice. That's not fairness. And that's why I'm going to keep fighting until that is in the budget.
Anything else, Jung-Yoon?
Thank you all for coming today. We really appreciate it. Would any of you be willing to share if a case you experienced was dismissed because of discovery violation?
That was the case you just
I
described.
just did.
Yeah, because
That was someone else's?
That is the case, yes.
Okay.
Mhm.
Have-
Erica Ewan can speak on her experience with not even knowing what a discovery law was when she was now being interviewed and being rushed to produce evidence, and she did not know that a timeline was happening.
Yeah. I mean, when you're talking about discovery, I didn't even know what that is. So the conversation, that word, first of all, that's not introduced to somebody. You go to the precinct, you file a police report, you get interrogated, you're telling your story, someone decides whether it's credible or not. Now, all of a sudden, somebody gets arrested, possibly. You don't want them arrested because you're fearful that it was my fault, because I just wanted to get protection to say, don't kill me. I didn't know that we were going to go through some process. To be told, I never was told what was going on. I was just brought to a precinct on a Sunday afternoon by myself upstairs in Harlem. By myself, and I was told, get in the police car. I said, I don't have to, I'm under arrest. No, we just want to talk to you. They followed me to the precinct. I walked by myself. I go upstairs and they're asking me a bunch of questions, showing me a bunch of things, and they're, oh, this is not going to be about you, the state. I said, write on a piece of paper that I'm not the one convicting, I'm not the one pressing charges. I just don't kill me. Like, that's my thing. I didn't say it. I didn't do it. They did what they did. And then it was, I'm going to the DA's office by myself. Don't know what's going on. I don't know what's happening. I didn't know what's happening. But then later on, as he was arrested and he had to check in with the precinct or check in with the court, they called me and said, well, it's been going on for 6 months now. I mean, and he really wants to leave the country. And, he hasn't bothered you, has he? And what do you want to do? Oh, wait, am I going to be now another reason why you can't do what you want to do? I said, okay, fine, drop it. I didn't know what that meant by dropping it. My order of protection. This person does not live far from me. I don't even know if this person still lives near me. I'm fearful every day because I made a decision that I wasn't educated about. And not that I couldn't get the education, I was too afraid because I was too ashamed. I was too ashamed to even say that this would happen to me. It's not something you can just easily do. And again, I never got justice for that. What happened? I didn't get justice for that. What it did, I thought it went away. Does it go away in my mind? No, it doesn't. But now with this law coming into play and this reform to this law coming into play, I had to say to Angelina, oh my God, that's what they was doing, discovery? Is that why the rush? Is that why everybody was asking me a bunch of questions and sending me here and sending me there? I didn't know anything. I'm just led by, don't kill me and don't put my name on that paper. Because if you put my name on the paper, that means that I am going to be more attacked. And then I have to admit I was a victim of domestic violence. Who wants to do that? All to something to be dismissed. So if I went forward and I did everything and it didn't come in time or they were late or something happened, and then you're going to say it didn't happen to me? Case is sealed, we can't talk about it. I got to wait till somebody else does it to me again, and that's what happened to me. I had another person do DV to me, so it's a DV history. So that person didn't do it, but we started all over again, because guess what? From the process, I didn't even learn anything. I just went right back into the same patterns. And what we're doing, we're stopping a pattern. It's a system that needs to be stopped, or it's going to keep going and going, and we're perpetuating the same crimes over and over again against people that need justice. So guess what? Don't be me. You don't want to be me. We want something that's going to be better.
That's right. That's right.
All right.
Obviously, this is very traumatic for these individuals to keep reliving it, but this shows the incredible courage and their passion and their desire to help us get these changes done, and I'm committed to them. I will not sign a budget this year that does not make New York safer and more affordable. Full stop. Thank you so much for coming in. I really do
Thank you.
Thank you
so much.
Kara's going to lead you out.
Catch your train.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Your mother's proud.
Yeah.
My mother's
Oh,
proud.
thank you.
I'm proud.
Oh, thank you.
you.
Thank you. Thank you. Oh, thank you for coming out. Thank you for having us.
they've experienced, but to be sure, did any of them have cases dropped because of the issues addressed by what you're proposing?
Yes. They're talking about, I don't remember this, Angelina, and I don't remember the second woman's name. Yes. Yes, absolutely. She's talking about how the case was dropped, didn't go forward because she could not find information that they were saying, and she did not know there's a clock running out. She didn't know she had to preserve information. So the system is so baffling to people, and it's really stacked against the victims. That's why we've seen a dramatic rise in the number of DV cases, domestic violence cases, that have now been dismissed, not just randomly, but since this law went into effect in 2020. The pattern is enormous. The trend line is going up, and you have to question why. What's the difference between this past 5 years and the previous 5 years? The law said if there's any bit of information that is not turned over, whether it's relevant, whether it's related, whether it's prejudicial, any standard, it doesn't matter. Was it something that would have affected the outcome? It doesn't matter. That has to be turned over or the case is dropped. But Brian, you want to elaborate on that?
No, I think you.
With all due respect, it sounds.
Can you let it finish?
Yes.
Sorry. I think you said it well, right? It's not about the relevance to the case. It's not about the prejudice of the defendant. It's all about 21 gigantic categories of evidence that need to be produced on an extraordinarily fast time frame. And if they're not produced on that time frame, then the case is dismissed.
It sounded like your case was more of a, victim survivors need more education about their options and how the system works.
Well, you can
doesn't sound
distill
like
it down
the
to
judge
that,
will
but if
throw
you
out the case.
have gone through what they have and the courage it takes, and they know they have sisters, they have a young woman at the end, had Sophia move in with her, a mother of 3, was run over by an abuser. That young woman is raising her 2 boys and the 3 boys of her friend. And she said that the case was dismissed. The case was dismissed. So I guarantee you will find thousands of cases because we have the data that shows that the number of cases dismissed in domestic violence and in other crimes is off the charts compared to what it should have been or what it's going to be after we pass this law. I'm committed to getting this done.
Rebecca?
Governor, the issue here, it sounded like she was unaware that there was a clock. The clock isn't really discovery. The clock is speedy trial. So as long as we have a speedy trial law, there will always be a clock. I mean, what's next? Are you going to propose repealing the state speedy trial law? Because that's the real clock. It's not a discovery, it's the fact that it's happening after the clock runs out.
I don't know whether it's intentional or not, but there seemed to be a missing of the point. The point is that there are people all over this state that have their cases dismissed. That is inarguable. I can show you the data right now if you want. I can go get it and show you the data that shows that domestic violence cases in particular, but other crimes that should never have been dismissed, should have gone forward because anybody with any common sense would have said, are you kidding me? That was dropped because of that? That's the reality of living in New York, which has the most progressive discovery laws in the nation. And I can tell you this, they pass our common sense reforms, it'll still be the most progressive discovery law in the nation. Other states don't have 21 categories that they have to go through and turn over everything. It is onerous. And I support what they did initially. Some of those reforms were necessary, but it went too far. They went too far, and if this is a result that they could not have foreseen, I'll accept that. But how do we let it go on when we know it's wrong? We have to stop this, make the tweaks, make the changes that are necessary so the pendulum doesn't go all the way back to where it was. I'm not asking for that. I'm not making it so prosecutors will never lose a case. I want it to be in the middle and have real justice for people, these women and the people they represent.
But I actually would love to see that data because dismissed cases are sealed. So we can't actually, we have to take your word, prosecutors' words, survivors' words.
Well, if you're not going to take my word, I don't know why I would bother turning over data to you, because you're not going to believe it anyhow. Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm saying I would love to see the data
Okay.
because
All right, we'll give you the numbers.
We're not allowed to look at it.
We'll let you
And
see
so
it.
we have no way
Brian,
to
we have
really-
statistics on this.
Yes, we have data.
that shows judicial rulings saying that this was a minor thing because I think Scrutinize put together a list of about 300 cases that they were able to get at, and the vast majority of the judicial rulings said that this was not a trivial minor technicality. This was a
Yeah, we have
egregious
that.
mistake by the prosecutor.
We have the data.
we're happy to share it with you. Anthony?
Governor, what's your position on reviving the Constitution pipeline?
It's something that was talked to me about by a number of people. I'm talking about how we can make sure that we are energy independent. We have a lot of problems, but I'm looking at nuclear. I'm looking at continuing our offshore wind. I made a strong case for this with the President of the United States. I want to keep offshore wind going. I want to re-up a lot more solar projects, focus on hydro, focus on battery storage, and that's what our energy strategy is right now.
Would you allow the project to move forward?
Go ahead, Anthony.
Yeah, would you allow the project to move forward in exchange for federal funding for the MPA or the NW?
That's not part of the conversation.
Speaking of the President of the United States, do you plan to meet with him again ahead of that deadline that the U.S. DOT has given the MTA over taking down the congestion pricing cameras? And as a follow-up to that, are you concerned what sort of measures the DOT or steps the DOT might take to get those cameras down?
Well, no, the cameras are not going down. I said the cameras are staying very clearly. Whether it's an in-person meeting, I'm sure I'll be down there again before long, maybe in the next month or so. But I also know how to reach him by phone. And he has called me, and I'll happily call him to remind him that this is important. It's important for New Yorkers. It's important to unlock the gridlock in the city that he knows better than any president since FDR, that he understands how important this is. So I will have that conversation once again, I'm rather certain.
Rob?
Governor, there was a lot of concern expressed from lawmakers in Western New York about the possible closure of Collins Correctional Facility. What could you say about those lawmakers who are saying they really fear this is going to be on the list of the 5 that are potentially cut in budget?
It does not have to be 5. It gives me authority to go up to 5. Last year I was authorized to do maybe 5 last year, and we did 2. So there's no guarantee. I would say that we are still working out the aftermath of an illegal, unauthorized wildcat strike that paralyzed our system for 22 days. We're trying to aggressively hire more people. We're trying to find ways to incentivize others who work in this space, get training taken care of. So there's a lot of things we're working on. That is one issue I have to look at. Not necessarily a particular place. I don't have my eyes on a particular location. But if you look at all this, the entire state system, I have a map that shows what the capacity of each is, how many people are working at each facility, and how many incarcerated individuals are there. And some are fairly lopsided, where there's, the numbers are rather telling.
Is Collins one of the lopsided ones?
I will say, no, I don't know. I don't have the data in front of me.
In the west and in the north, there are significantly lower numbers of correction officers compared to the east.
Governor, you said that this was your path, the budget was your path for discovery, and other policy issues, I assume this is your path as well. Was your overtime strategy, is that an intentional thing? Was that your plan to get into the late budget so you did have this kind of authority?
No, we didn't have to be this late. First of all, my budget was introduced in January, so everyone knew what I was looking for. And I had 7 pre-budget meetings, then 9 budget meetings with the leaders or our staffs are combined. So there's been a lot of meetings, and every single one of them, starting back over a month ago, I said, let's act with urgency. We can make this deadline. Let's roll up our sleeves and get this done. You know what I need to get? I know what the majority of New Yorkers, the vast majority of New Yorkers are looking for. They want common sense public safety and affordability. What does that mean? It means changing the discovery laws, not to go back to the bad old days, but to inject some common sense into the standards that judges use to evaluate whether or not something is prejudicial or not. But also, we have a problem with people who desperately need compassionate care because they have mental health problems and can't take care of themselves. So I've said all along, this is another one of my major priorities. I want to make sure we get cell phones in schools. We have a whole list of ideas. They're not new to the legislators. This is not something dropped. My major priorities have not been dropped in the last minute. And so my goal is always to strive for an on-time budget, but I would also say we've had some success with policies that would never have happened. Avi, do you happen to have that available? These are all the policies that were in my budget that I proposed in January that occurred. Now, we fixed the bail laws. We broke up criminal retail theft rings. We padlocked illegal cannabis stores. We have our generational deal to build more housing. You all went through that with me. Increasing minimum wage and indexing to inflation. Eliminating co-pays on insulin, maternal health, paid breaks for breastfeeding moms, portable cribs. Empire AI, back to basics reading. This is the phonics that we're all talking about. Articles been showing that we've been doing it wrong for 20 years. I'm the one who stood up and challenged the system and said we're changing it. Mayoral control, zombie charter schools, safer streets, Sandy's law. These are things that I had to put in my budget because they were not going to happen in the normal course of events, at least the majority of them. So I'd rather get it done March 31st. We can. I always set forth on a path to be done March 31st. But I need willing partners who approach with the same sense of urgency as I do.
Governor, the legislature will say, though, that you did drop several issues that they think are blocking a budget deal. And if I could just, with all due respect,
Sure.
You have accomplished a lot through this budget process. Is that good government when you have three people negotiating this instead of going, if it wouldn't get passed in the legislature, isn't that a concern that the legislation might not be ready or it might not be good?
Or they don't have an aggressive individual driving results, and that's me.
Well,
I've changed the culture.
Either way, it's not being done in the legislative process.
Right, right. And these are all things that New Yorkers want, that people who represent individual districts, which is what the legislature does, and I have a lot of respect for them, I have to look at what 20 million New Yorkers want and what's important for them is affordability and public safety. Those are my driving messages this year. I welcome them to work with me because I'm certain that their constituents want the same. This is the path I have. They can work on more initiatives in the legislative session. I'll either sign them or I'll veto them. But that's what the governor does, looks out for the entire state.
Do the ends justify the means?
I'm saying this has been successful.
Well, right, but...
Right.
I think she just answered that.
But no, she didn't. Do the ends then justify the means? If you think that those are the ends that are...
Yeah, and I think what I explained more clearly than distilling it down to that simple concept is that there are major priorities that I unveil in January. Every year, we talk about them. But some are hard to get over the finish line for individual members of the legislature, even though they are supported by a vast majority of individuals in the state. This also allows them to, they can take credit for this. This is part of their accomplishments. This is how I'm going to continue to do it if I have to. But I'd much rather have all this discussed and accomplished by the deadline. But I'm not going to compromise my principles over a date. We were late once 32 days, we were late 20 days. I don't embrace that, I don't relish that, but I'm not going to back down from a fight when I know who I'm fighting for, including those women who are just sitting here pleading with someone to do something that's common sense. I'm going to bring more and more common sense to this place, and that's what you get when I do.
Got time for a handful more? Jimmy, did you have one?
Yeah, Governor, there's a proposal on the table to renew Tesla's lease for the state factory at Riverbend. It would reduce the required jobs that Tesla has to have around the state. It would also have them agree to invest some more capital, and they're going to up their rent from $1 to about $2 million initially. Is that a good deal? Should they do
Let me
that?
take a look at that more closely. I've been a little distracted with this, but I'm aware that there's more interest in changing that dynamic going forward in light of Tesla. So I'm going to look at that. I truly want to look at that, and so I don't have an answer for you right now.
Alex?
Sticking with Tesla, there were two bills related to the issue of Teslas introduced recently. Senator Walczyk and Assemblyman Tague introduced a bill that would classify destruction of personal property over a political position as a Class C felony. Does that sound like something that you would support? And additionally...
I've not heard of that one before. I mean, I'm focused on what I have in the budget. What they pass will come to my desk, usually on average from 800 to 1,000 bills they do in the next couple months and land them on my desk, and then I spend the next 6 months having to read every one of them and make sure they're correct and decide whether I'll support it or not. So when it gets to that point, you will know my opinion.
Elise?
Governor, how do you feel about where you are with the conversations on Discovery? Do you think you're getting close to where you want to be?
I met with the leaders again today, talked to DAs, brought them up here. The constant communication, not just at our level, but with our staffs, we are trying to get to a position that'll solve the problem we have, respond to what the DAs need, understand the rights of defendants, and make this a better process for everyone. So where I am today, there's been a lot of days I felt like we made a lot of progress. The next day that goes back 2 steps, then we go forward. So the day's still young that considering the hours we've been keeping. So I don't have that answer, but where I am today does not matter. It's where I end up. And I will end up with discovery changes in this budget.
Bond?
Governor, I see you've been you're scheduled to go down to D.C. next month for a House oversight hearing on sanctuary policies.
I'm looking forward to that.
What has the administration's cooperation with the House Oversight Committee's investigation been like so far? Has there been an exchange of any kind of materials? And what do you think of the mayor's policy to recuse himself from things involving ICE on Rikers?
Yeah, I'm not going to second guess the mayor on that, but I will tell you, we just received notification of their interest in my opinion on the state laws, which I'm happy to share with them. I have told people like Tom Homan that I will continue doing what our practice has been from the beginning, which is to cooperate with ICE when they have a warrant or they have evidence that there's a person who's committed a serious crime, who's someone who's committed a crime in their home country, committed a crime here, they're on a terrorism watch list, someone who should not be here because of criminal activity. I said, I will call you first if you want me to, and I will help you with that. And I said that to him a couple days ago when I asked him to bring back the 3rd grader they took away from Sackett's-Harmer, his hometown. So that's the answer to that question. I don't know what they're asking for yet. All I know is we got notified yesterday, and I'll happily go tell them that. But I've told him, and I'll tell them, our policy in the state of New York is not to use state resources, our state police, to enforce just civil infractions. My state police have a lot of work to do. They're very busy people, fighting crime, reducing gun violence, and so I'm going to keep them on that. But when they need our help, our laws do not prohibit that.
And do you plan to cooperate with that investigation? Are there certain guardrails you don't want to?
I'm happy to
see
talk
that
to them.
wish onto you?
I'll see my old colleagues down there. I'll be happy to go down. If they want to talk about it, I'll talk about it.
Last one, Kate, who hasn't said something yet.
Governor, just curious how the meeting went. What's the holdup? Why? You're just curious why this is still, do leaders understand what you want? What is the issue that it's not getting done?
I reiterated there will not be a budget without discovery law changes. We're also making progress on the mental health side as well, which is very important to me. Those would be the sticky points. I do believe that when those are accomplished, which could be any day or any time, that'll unleash a lot of work that's also been going on. I don't want to say that nothing has been going on. I mean, I have a long list of areas where we've already reached some consensus. The leader herself had 170 policy items in the budget. So there's what's going to drop, what's going to pass, what's going to be agreed upon. There's a lot of things that have already, I don't want people to think there's nothing been happening because of discovery. A lot has been happening. And so once the floodwaters break and we have an agreement, which I'm willing to put in the hours, the days, whatever it takes to get that done, then I think it'll move fairly quickly after that.
Good things happen in April, everybody.
What about May?